Welcome back to On the Entrepreneur's Journey. I'm your host, Peter Santry, a former Wall Street executive turned leadership team coach. This podcast helps entrepreneurs shortcut their journey by learning from leaders who built real companies, navigated real challenges, and created models worth learning about. My guest today is Brittni Winslow, CEO and owner of Emerge Pediatric Therapy, a North Carolina-based practice providing occupational, physical, and speech therapy for children and training clinicians nationwide through its education arm, Therapeutic Edge. Brittni's business lives at the intersection of purpose and profit, where providing exceptional care and sustaining a healthy enterprise are in constant tension. We'll explore how she keeps clinicians energized, how she keeps her company profitable, and navigates Medicaid funding pressures, all while delivering top-notch care to the next generation. So welcome to the show, Brittni.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Great. Great. Well, let's start by your origin story. I mean, it's such a nice sort of altruistic purpose that you have behind your business. How did you get interested in pediatric therapy? And tell us about how your journey to ending up owning actually a full practice with tons of clinicians reporting into you. How did that go?
Yeah, so I'm the oldest of three kids. So I think I just kind of, grew up in the system. And my youngest sibling is 10 years younger than me. So I've always kind of been around pediatrics. Babysat, did all those things. So I did a lot as I was growing up within interacting with kids, and I really enjoyed that. And then also the leadership part of it. So have always been, putting too much on my plate. So, president of this, captain of this or whatever, right? So leadership was always really big, and also pediatrics. So when I was thinking about how I wanted to kind of intersect both of those, I actually learned about occupational therapy through a family friend. I thought I wanted to do physical therapy. That's just kind of what seemed like, working with kids physically, in the pediatric area, that seemed like that fit. And then I learned about occupational therapy. So fast forward, went to school to become an occupational therapist, always knowing I wanted to do pediatrics. Found the fieldwork placement that I want. You have to do 2 different rotations of fieldwork, and so I picked a pediatric placement in the city that I wanted to be in. Started out there as a fieldwork student and really loved it, and was offered a job at that facility whenever I graduated. And so that's actually the clinic that I now own. So I did start as a fieldwork student at the organization and then worked my way kind of through that. But it definitely was not a straight path. I started out and really, loved the work, loved working with kids, loved making a difference, working with the families. I felt really passionate about the type of work that we were doing within our particular clinic, and it just seemed really natural and collaborative with the parents. But 6 months in, I did not love it. I loved the work, but the work culture was not for me. And so I went out looking for other places to go, actually. Got offered a couple jobs, looked at things in the hospital, and ultimately decided that, I was going to kind of somehow shift from this like victim mindset to more of an agency mindset. I wanted to stay where I was. I loved my clients. I loved the people I was working with generally. So I started proposing some changes within the organization to the owner. Being a really, really new clinician, that was scary, but also I felt like I was kind of going in and fighting for my dream and what I wanted. I wanted to be there. And if things could change where I was, that was kind of the perfect fit. So I did that, and just kind of one thing led to another. So started taking on some leadership positions within the company as a new clinician. And then when the existing owner was looking to retire, she reached out to me and asked if I might be interested in it. So mentored under her for a few years, and then went into co-ownership for a year. So 2018 was, I co-owned the company with her, and then I bought it outright in 2019. So definitely a wild journey, but very thankful for it.
That's wild. And so you bought it in 2019, and obviously
Mhm.
we all know what happened right after that. And
Yes.
unlike a lot of other businesses, your business actually grew because COVID
Mhm.
created a lot of demand, but you also made some acquisitions. So tell us a little bit about that whole thing, navigating COVID and then deciding to make the acquisitions that you made. And how were you able to do that through all that turbulence?
Yeah. Yeah. So, 2018, when I was a co-owner, I started kind of laying the foundation, I think, for looking at the right metrics because we had not been. We started really just trying to make things more efficient and just, making some changes while I was still in the co-owner role. And so when I bridged into that first year of being the full owner in 2019, we're able to implement even more of those changes. And like you said, we definitely grew through optimizing and looking at the right things to the place where we needed to expand. So we decided to expand. Planned to open that first location March of 2020, and yes, COVID hit. So we already had the location kind of moving in the right direction. We started really lean with opening that second location because it was the first venture. I had just bought the company and now we were doubling the company essentially pretty quickly. So we actually found a location that had been a pediatric therapy practice that was already pretty well outfitted for that. They were leaving that space. And so we went into the space. So we started lean, which was greatly to our advantage going into COVID. Navigated through that, through the world of virtual therapy, which is just, if you would have asked me in January of 2020 if I would have ever done or endorsed telehealth for pediatrics, I would have said it's probably not going to work out, but definitely had to change my thinking really quickly. And our team pivoted like we all had to, and pulled off, I think it was about 80% of our clients transitioned from in-person to telehealth for those first few months. So yeah, people are with their kids and out of school and all the different changes that kind of COVID, I think we'll be seeing the research come out of this for years of like how this changed development and all of that. More and more kids needed therapy. So that that second location in 2020 quickly then built into a third location that we opened in the beginning of 2022, just because we continued to grow. So here we are today. It's still the three locations.
Oh, not to get political, but just
Yeah.
interest. It's just, the children, you're kind of a lifeline for, schools are closed and people aren't,
Mhm.
are staying in their homes. Um, from a professional perspective, you know, what's the real damage here? I mean, is this
Yeah.
something really cost kids a couple years of real maturation and growth and all the things that kids need to succeed when they get older. Just
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So I have three kids, and my oldest daughter was in kindergarten whenever COVID hit.
mm,
So I get to see this from the clinical perspective and also from the parent perspective. And you see, I mean, we talk about this kind of cohort of kids who started kindergarten, in this time of the world, being what it was and having to go through virtual school. So absolutely. I mean, immediately we saw a lot of speech issues with kids because they couldn't see how sounds were being produced when people were wearing masks. We saw a lot of things like separation anxiety issues, like people were so used to being with their families and didn't get experiences they used to. So there's social issues that come out of that. And then just a whole gamut of developmental issues. I mean, they even went back and changed the milestones and the benchmarks for hitting certain milestones after COVID. So they're kind of like adjusting what they think is appropriate for kids post pandemic, which I personally don't think is appropriate. We still use the standard kind of milestones for what we would expect, but it's changed a lot of kids and a lot of families.
yeah, I can imagine. And I'm sure your work was very needed at the time, and it's a
Yeah.
good thing you were there. And it also drove demand. I mean, let's face it, you
Mhm.
had a lot more sessions, did you not, during that time period?
Yeah, for sure. And we had to, I think because we were getting creative about how we were doing that too. We could meet a kid outside in a park. We could, we had to rethink our space. We had to, if someone could be on telehealth, they could be on telehealth. And then we could see them in their home, but not be in their home. So there were kids that, like for feeding therapy, for instance, that really blossomed during that time of telehealth because we could actually support them at their dinner table through a screen. So a lot of unanticipated pros and cons through that whole process.
Oh, that's interesting. So let's tack away. Your business model, you're obviously expanding the core therapy business, and then you
Mhm.
decide that you wanted to get into sort of more of a group, you go from one-on-one to group, or you call clubs, I guess, where you
Yeah.
group of children together. And then you got into continuing education where you're actually
Mhm.
training clinicians. Tell us about your thought pattern behind those moves.
Yeah. So the clubs that we do are really great as a way to be able to translate what kids are working on one with their therapist to a smaller group setting. So we, have dabbled with them over the years. They've always kind of been a part of what we've done, but we really started to lean into more of that model over time, being able to offer, and it is a cash-based service. Insurance doesn't reimburse for these groups. And so we, you know, keep the ratios to where that makes sense for us. We have 2 clinicians and we have no more than 6 kids in those groups. So it's just another way for us to be able to get more kids into therapy, do therapy in different ways, offer something kind of after that one-on-one. And we're able to offer, we can do so many of them, they last for an hour. You can do 2 groups at a time, like all of that. So we're really able to expand what we were doing in a way that was also integrate revenue model for us to be able to do that as a cash pay service.
Right. So more impacting more people positively, and then of
Yeah.
course the bonus of paying. And that sort of gets into the next question, which is, your pay structure is very heavily weighted to the Medicaid side of things. Uh,
Right.
and we all know what's happening in reimbursement rates there. And then
Yeah.
you have private pay, no real insurance, regular insurance pay.
Right.
How do you maintain your mission when you have that kind of pay structure where you have that, kind of very tight reimbursement rates?
Yeah, it's definitely hard and it definitely forces us to be really creative and innovative. I told my team when, in North Carolina, these, yes, the Medicaid cuts just hit us October 1st. And, I was, went to my team and explaining these things of we are already thinking so creatively about how we do therapy anyways, being a practice that is, Medicaid and TRICARE and then private pay for the other part of the population and not having that commercial revenue or commercial insurance kind of population. Um, so yeah, so we have to really make sure that we are diversifying what we're doing. I mean, there's a lot that we can do through insurance and there's a lot that we can't do through insurance. And so looking at how to maintain that, at least 30% of our population as self-pay, how can we do that in a way that's going to really meet the needs of our community, be something that's different than other people aren't already doing, do it better. Maintaining that in a different way has been something that we are always looking at how to improve and how to come at from different angles. We do have to make sure that our team is paying attention to their productivity because with that, like you mentioned, that margin that we have is makes things kind of slim sometimes. And so we've got to make sure that we are looking at while we so in our clinic we also have this philosophy that I don't want clinicians treating for the whole 40 hours they're here because they need this time, they need additional time built in to talk to doctors, parents, like all of those other things that happen that really make our mission and our philosophy unique to what we're doing. And so even though we have kind of lower productivity, they need to make sure they're hitting that, right? So
Mhm.
then there's the side of how can we support our clinicians to make sure that they are able to hit their targets and do really great therapy and do the other pieces. So what are the other elements that we can bring in to help support them so they can do what we call as our core work? Um, so it's a constant dance, right? Of what are the different services? How can we support our clinicians to make sure that that all works?
Okay, let me unpack that a little bit
Yeah,
because it seems like, if you were an airline like Southwest
right.
Air, they try to keep their planes in the air all the time because that's their earning asset. And in your case, that's
Yeah,
people, let's face it.
right,
So if
right.
you were hard-nosed business person, you would say 40 hours, you're going to have a, one-on-one with students or children at all times.
Hmm.
You have
Yeah,
to, and yet you're saying we want to have that balance. We want to have the family time to, deliver a better experience. But it must
yeah.
be, and when you're getting pressured on rates,
Hmm.
really have a balance. And then so I laud you for that because you're obviously looking for impact in that trade-off
Right.
there. And then in the second instance, you're looking at finding ways to increase your private pay. And what are some of the
Mhm.
strategies you use with the private pay students? I know you go to schools to deliver
Yeah.
services. What other things are you doing to attract that, I'm assuming, higher margined audience?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we do embed ourselves in a lot of the private schools around the area. So that's great for the families. They don't have to bring their kids to the clinic. We're able to be there, and come to them and coordinate with the teachers and all of that. A big part of how we continue to expand this private pay is by looking at a few different things. And one is we pour into our therapist in so many different ways. Education is a huge part of that. So we have really highly skilled clinicians. And through that, unfortunately, even with insurance, we don't get reimbursed any more for a specialized service than we do kind of standard. It's across the board, you get the same reimbursement. So when we look at how to continue to add more private pay services that is going to have that higher margin, we've started doing a lot more consulting with our skilled clinicians. So we have these clinicians that have tons of training that are great assets to parents, to schools, to other organizations. So we're finding more ways to connect them to help them do things through more of a coaching and consulting model than directly doing the therapy. And that serves, our clinicians as they get more training and they have more opportunities to be able to do that. We're able to charge, our private pay rates for that. And also as our clinicians, have been in the field for longer, it's a great way for them to diversify what they're doing from an energy perspective too. I mean, working with kids all day long and, the kids that we work with are not always super easy and, like just come in ready to work, right? There's a lot of energy that goes into it. So it's also a win-win because then they're able to really do what they're passionate about, in a way that it's also not really, a really draining therapy session.
Yeah.
Um, so that's been really great for sure.
It's a nice diversifier for your labor force.
Yeah.
So then you go out and you buy the continuing education.
Yep.
And so now this is a totally different business. You're actually training clinicians all over the country. It's beyond the research triangle where
Hmm.
your clinics are. Tell us about that. I mean, is that and how is that going? And is it a higher margin revenue stream, or what's the reasoning behind pursuing that business and that acquisition?
Yeah, so it started, we had actually started developing something on our own. We really wanted to train other practices on how to consider um, neurodivergent staff. So staff that might have ADHD or, autism or different ways of learning themselves. How can we support them? We're doing that really well in our organization. So we wanted to expand that to other clinics and kind of teach them how to do that in a way that worked for the business and also these staff members that we have. Um, so it started there along the lines of starting to build that out so we could do more coaching through that angle. There was a continuing education company that was up for sale. So we decided to go in and acquire that company as a way to kind of give us a little stepping stone to similar to how I did the practice, right? I didn't grow the practice from ground up. I came in and bought an existing practice. And so it was a very kind of familiar format there for us. So bought those assets. And then from that, I mean, again, these skilled clinicians, they can train people one-on-one, but they can also put out courses. They can train other clinicians. And we're seeing people buy courses, not just here in the United States, but, around the world. And because we're offering this on a digital platform, you can just download it and use it and then use it for your continuing education. So the reason for buying that again was we have this mission of wanting to just continue to educate and expand the reach and just help other clinicians and other families to adopt what we're doing. And we think that we're doing therapy really well, and we think we're doing it in a way that's really effective. And how can we duplicate that? And doing that online was a great way to do it.
Okay, so I'm thinking about you now. You're running two businesses.
Yeah.
How do you allocate resources and your time between those two businesses? Because I would think the training part, um, a little bit more, maybe higher margin cash flow if to the extent you grow.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
but it's also you have to kind of create a brand to get people to actually start to say that you're a thought leader. And I mean, there's a lot that goes into establishing credibility for those courses.
Correct.
And so
Yeah.
how do you straddle those two sort of objectives?
Yeah, so the company we bought, we did go in and rebrand it. It was originally just for occupational therapists, and so we rebranded that so that we could do more with taking on, other therapy disciplines, parents, teachers, all of that. So we started that first year really working on the branding, working on the existing population and trying to engage that population that we had that was already engaged with the initial company that we had purchased. And starting to try to produce more courses. I do have a virtual assistant that works full time on that part of the company, which is helpful to keep things moving in the day to day. Because I think it is really easy. You look at the the revenue possibilities within the side of the company are huge. I mean, really infinite, and there's a lot of willingness to work on that and put a lot of energy into that. But also, when I am running this business on the ground day to day, that the tendency for the continuing education side of the company to be kind of on the back burner was there. So we're able to just continue to build the audience, listen to populations and figure out what's needed so that we can produce more courses and finding opportunities to engage with and partner with. I love doing affiliate partnerships and engaging with other people who are doing this well in the space too. So we'll get together and we'll use each other's audiences to do that. So it's been a growing experience. I think we got really good at marketing, of in-person brick and mortar type of, the therapy service that we know, but being able to market online is a whole different process. And so it's been a slow learning, but starting to kind of pull the pieces together now.
Great, great. So, one subject we didn't touch on, well, we touched on a little bit, is just your labor force is obviously the therapists
Yeah.
themselves, and we talked a little bit about the sort of keeping them energized and not burn out from working 40 hours with kids, and you bring in an interesting mix of activities that they can do so they stay pretty fresh and motivated.
Mhm.
Tell me about, I mean, is there a lot, is the labor force deep for that? Can you find people to do this business in this tough environment? Are they plentiful? Do you have labor issues around that?
We have had labor issues. It has been something that I think, again, is just a byproduct of COVID. We had a lot of clinicians that stayed around and stayed in the field and kind of, got through COVID together. And then we saw a big fall off, not only within our clinics, but with the profession in general after COVID. So I think people did get burned out. We had clinicians that were working with us that just completely left the field and went into other things. And so for sure there's a rebuilding of that now, but even with talking to the schools where OTs, PTs, and speech therapists get trained, they're seeing less people apply. And again, it's coming back up, but there was a time where yes, there weren't enough people. It is hard work. The particular area that we're in pediatric therapy, particularly working with kids who have sensory processing needs and autism and executive function, it's hard work, and it can lead to burnout really quickly. And I think also working with parents who are in really high stress situations day in and day out, that can be really taxing on clinicians. In combination with the fact that insurance companies are not, knocking on the door to pay us any more money. So people are getting more training and they want to be paid more, but the money's not there to do that. So we have seen a turnaround in that recently. We also are really particular about who we hire. We want to make sure we're hiring the right people and not just warm bodies. So it's been something we've had to be creative in what we offer and how we support our team to make sure that we are getting good clinicians and keeping good clinicians.
Yeah, yeah. That's yeah. I mean, it is a people business in every way,
Mm-hmm.
they serve and the people you hire. I mean, I mean, it is your number one and two and three challenge, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
So that's great. So let's fast forward. You've done a lot since you bought the company. I mean, we're 6 years in. You bought a couple businesses, expanded locations, got this continuing education business up and running. So what do the next 3 to 5 years look like for you? Where are you going next, Brittni?
Yeah. The even 3 years sounds, like infinite amount of time considering all the growth we had in those first few years. But when we really think about, yes, there's things that are out of our control, to a degree. I would love to see, insurance funding turn around and, all of that. But, that aside, what I really want to see us do is continue to like refine the philosophy and the vision that we have for our clinics and see that duplicated in some sort of way. So whether that is doing more training and consulting, helping other clinicians to really be able to or like other clinics in general adopt more of what we're doing here, how we think that that's doing really well, that would be a big win for us to be able to see that duplicated. For us, there's ways to really make this therapy model really profitable. There's another type of therapy that we don't offer, which is ABA, so applied behavior analysis. A lot of clinics add that. It's a more lucrative type of therapy than direct OT, PT, and speech. For us, it doesn't fall within our kind of our philosophy. So we have other ways that we do that. We have other ways that we serve and connect and build relationships with our clients. And so continuing to get that packaged in a way to be able to train other clinics and see other clinics be really successful, that would be great. Would really love alongside that to be able to build more of this therapeutic edge company up to a place where we are really continuing to see higher revenue through that, getting our clinicians to record more courses, to get those out there, and also to see other clinicians outside of our walls to build courses and resources so that we are known as the place to go to really get the best training, to get the best mentorship. So continuing to build our thought leadership in both of those ways is what we're going to continue to work on over the next 3 to 5 years. In addition to just continuing to innovate and, find the ways to be profitable in this time where it is hard to do that. So constant innovation, how we use technology differently, all of that will just have to evolve as things kind of get put on our plate.
Yeah, and that's something I actually hadn't thought of, but you can't pick up a paper or go anywhere without knowing about AI. And I would think that,
Mm-hmm.
there has to be ways to leverage that for for your clinicians somehow. To certainly, I mean, an hour can be used in front of a one-on-one with a child, but I'm sure there's a lot of paperwork that goes with it, that goes to the reimbursements and all that sort of stuff. And
Oh yeah.
maybe creating efficiencies within the business through using AI and a lot of the back end in terms of being able to do a lot of the write-ups and the administrative stuff that goes along with your business, I'm sure hand in hand.
Yeah, I mean, there's a new technology that we're actually adopting right now. It's getting kind of configured for our use starting in January, but it's a major change that we're going to be going through, and it's going to change every workflow in the whole company. But it is very heavily AI based, but in a way that doesn't replace clinical reasoning. I mean, exact things that you're saying, things that we have to track and all the paperwork and making sure billing is clean. And like, I mean, there's so much, and I mentioned the support staff that we have to help keep our clinicians focused on their core work, but those are all, salaried, employees or, hourly, whatever employees that we have that we're paying people to do that some technology can do now. So we want to be able to adjust the workflows so that there's still a place for everyone in the organization. We just are going to have to kind of change what we're doing and how we do that, but we have to use technology to help support us. And it's kind of one of those things like we have to get on board because it's gonna keep keep growing and evolving, and so
Yeah,
we're gonna be doing it.
yeah, you don't want the train to be out of the station.
Right, right.
But I do like the thought too of maybe expanding some product offerings to
Yeah,
maybe a little bit in the private pay field that will allow you to to grow that way, and certainly the consulting and coaching. I mean, just think about the model of athletics and
yeah,
the private coaching that goes on.
yeah,
Certainly, if you have a child that has learning challenges or whatever the diagnosis is, parents tend to be willing to pony up for their children to make sure that
yeah.
they succeed. And I think that's probably an area that you could tap into. And certainly
Yeah.
therapeutic edge, education business may be another one that you could leverage and maybe put some management talent behind and grow it.
Yeah. And, a lot of what we're doing in the private pay area too just comes from listening to what people need. And, kind of a crazy, one of the big, I've been working on a kind of one-on-one program here in the clinics, and I'm also building out a course for is around just this concept of sensory processing and executive function. But it was literally born out of me overhearing a conversation at a pool one day that two parents were having about how frustrated this parent was because she was constantly having to go take her kids like their soccer ball or their homework, or their kids, they're like tweens and teens, were forgetting things, and kind of this frustration that this parent was having around, how can I, like, when are we going to get past this, or how can I support them in this? And I just listened to that conversation unfold, and I'm uniquely trained to be able to help support in that way, right? So they were like, okay, well, great, we're going to put together a program that's going to really help to, you don't have to have a particular diagnosis to still struggle with that. And maybe that's something that came out of COVID too, just like more dependence on parents or less, and like, whatever it is. But just listening to what people need and thinking about how can we create something that's going to help to serve that need. Um, so it is fun, but it's fun to kind of create those new things. But, you have to slow down as a business owner to be able to listen enough to hear what the needs are, because there's the tendency to just kind of push forward, full steam ahead all the time.
Well, I think the most successful people are the ones that are immersed in their customers and they're listening to them and they're figuring
Yeah.
out where the needs are. And it's not so bad when it happens around the pool. So
Right. 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 Yes.
that's great. Well, Tiffany, thank you very much for your time today. I love how you're combining your mission and the profitability, and in a tough look, it's a tough funding environment for what
Yep.
you do. It's necessary, and obviously people need it and appreciate it, and we wish you luck. And
Thank you.
to the audience, thank you for joining us for another episode of On the Entrepreneur's Journey, and we will see you next time. Thanks.